base, 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 base. Louisville Soul Train. Louisville Soul Train.
Welcome to Calling Audibles Radio, an affiliated broadcast of PurposeToPlay.com. I'm your humble host, Matty Petrero. So what is Calling Audibles Radio, you ask? Simply put, CA Radio is changing the play at the line of scrimmage on the mainstream sports media and the stories they present on a daily basis. All too often, sports media, like other forms of media, shine a spotlight on the negative and rides that wave as long as it can. Why? Because they know that sensational stories keep readers and listeners coming back time and again, increasing advertising dollars. We here at CA Radio and P2P believe that stories of brave and inspirational folks in everyday walks of life provide just as much entertainment as months of constant steroid talk or that of off-the-field indiscretions. Additionally, there are far more heartwarming stories out there than those riding the sensational gravy train. You just need to know where to find them, and we're here to help with just that. Oh yeah, and there's one more benefit to getting your sports fix at CA Radio and P2P. You won't feel the need for mouthwash to get rid of the bad aftertaste left by the other guys. So welcome to Calling Audibles Radio. Over the past 35 years or so, huge gains have been made to diagnose and treat mental health diseases such as depression, anxiety, OCD, PTSD, and many others. Both medically and stigmatically, folks suffering from such maladies are diagnosed and treated more easily than 4 decades ago. Additionally, one doesn't need to feel reluctant to seek treatment as society is now more educated and accepting of such diseases. And they are diseases. Something like depression has been proven to be a chemical imbalance no different from hyperthyroidism or slow-working thyroid. Imagine growing up in Western Canada, in ranch country. Of course, hockey is life, and for anybody who doesn't know much about hockey players, sorry, I had to throw a little bit of Canadianese there for our friends north of the border. But many of them are too tough and proud to seek treatment for much of anything. In addition to being hockey players, a lot of these guys are ranch hands and cowboys. These are guys who have their faces gashed by pucks and sticks. They go back into the trainer's room, they get stitched up, and they're back on the ice having missed only one shift. Maybe. So dealing with something like mental health disease is handled with emotional duct tape. Cowboy up and soldier on is the mantra. Former NHL goaltending great Clint Malarchuk is the kind of guy I just described. How tough is Malarchuk? Try this on for size. He spent days upon days on the frozen ponds playing hockey with other kids, often from sunrise to sunset. He survived a violently alcoholic, mostly absent father. He brawled with his brother and best man just before his first wedding, destroying the whole ceremony and reception. He played 10 years in the NHL as a goalie and was not afraid to drop his gloves and fight with opponents, even though that isn't something that goaltenders usually do. He survived a life-threatening accident in one of the most gruesome scenes in the history of sports, and he has cheated death on several occasions, including a 2008 suicide attempt. And that's only really scratching the surface. However, his toughest challenge was battling demons he could not identify. His formative years were those spent, as I previously described, when mental health disease was swept under the rug, if it could even be diagnosed at all. As a huge hockey fan, I was blessed with an opportunity to speak with Malarchuk in a candid discussion about his life dealing with a myriad of mental health issues and the release of his book, A Matter of Inches, How I Survived Life in the Crease and Beyond. If you're in Canada, the name of the book is The Crazy Game, How I Survived Life in the Crease and Beyond. In this episode of Calling Audibles Radio, I get to share with you this very candid conversation with a guy who has been defying the odds for practically his whole life. And wait until you find out about the conversation he had with former President Reagan. And of course, the weekly Jeers and Cheers, the Matty Awards, will be handed out, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Calling Audibles Radio only on PurposeToPlay.com.
What is slashing?
Slashing is like that, you know?
Mm-hmm. And there's a penalty for that?
Yeah. And for a trip also, you know, like that, and for hook like this, and for spear, you know, like that. All bad.
Bad.
You do that, you go to the box, you know. 2 minutes by yourself, and you feel shame, and then you get free.
A truly funny scene indeed from one of the great sports movies of all time. That would be the opening scene from the movie Slapshot. Welcome back to Calling Audibles Radio here on PurposeToPlay.com. I'm your host, Matty Petraro. I had the great honor of being able to interview former NHL goaltending great Clint Malarchuk. We talked a lot about his career in the NHL, and we also discussed his lifelong battle with mental health disease. I should say mental health diseases, because he's been diagnosed with multiple maladies related to mental health, and surviving many encounters with death. I think there was a reason for him to survive, because back in November he wrote a book, A Matter of Inches: How I Survived Life in the Crease and Beyond. And in it he shares, he gets really intimate in this book, and he pulls back all the layers of the onion so you can see everything, and he did it in an effort to hopefully help anybody who might read it. So if you think you may be dealing with something, or you know somebody who may be dealing with some mental health issues, I would recommend getting this book, because frankly, I think if a tough guy like Clint Malarchuk can finally come face to face with his mental health demons and survive, I think there's quite a lot in this book to help anybody. So without further ado, my conversation with NHL great Clint Malarchuk on Calling Audibles Radio here on PurposeToPlay.com. It is my honor to bring to you 10-year NHL veteran, lifetime survivor, author, and public speaker Clint Malarchuk. Clint, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's good to be on a show like this. They're always fun.
Well, I certainly appreciate it, and I'm a lifelong hockey fan, but unfortunately I am not wearing my Quebec Nordiques jersey as I had planned to do when I was scheduled to do this interview. So sorry about that.
Well, you're probably wearing a Caps one.
Well, actually, truth be told, I'm an Islander fan. I grew up my whole life in New Jersey, and I was an Islander fan long before the Devils came to town. But I bring this up because there are a couple of things that you mentioned in the book that kind of struck a chord with me, and one of those was I don't know if it was your first game or your second game ever. You played a 10-7 shootout against the Islanders.
Yeah.
Of course, that was at a time when the Islanders were in the middle of their 4 consecutive Stanley Cup championship run. So, there is no shame in giving up 10 goals to that Islander team.
Yeah. It was my first NHL game was the night before, and it went fabulous. I think I got second star and everything, so they gave me the next start, and it was the mighty Islanders when they were in their in the dynasty, and also on Long Island. So yeah, that one typical 1980s hockey, and it wasn't a goalie's battle by any means, but the only thing that made me feel better was that it was Billy Smith at the other end getting scored on just like I was.
Yeah, it's definitely a different game, but it surprises me a little bit, because just a few years, like right after the lockout, or the work stoppage back in 2004, 2005, they really put the kibosh on the neutral zone trap, the left wing lock. They got rid of the 2-line pass and tried to open up the game more, and yet there still seems to be a whole lot of 2-1 games, 3-2, 1-0 type of close kind of hockey, and to me it just doesn't kind of make sense.
Well, I don't think the chances are as many in the games. The systems have evolved so much, and the advance of video and the technology helping the game, and we used to have 2 coaches, a coach and assistant coach. Now they've got probably 5 coaches total, counting the video coach and then maybe a skills coach, 2 assistants, sometimes 3.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So
special teams.
It's so true. So it's I think knocked down scoring chances a little bit, and to me the 80s was supreme for for it wide open, end to end, and you'd see your goals because the games would be 5-4, 6-5. But it wasn't that the goalies were playing bad. It was that there was so many that you'd see 3 or 4 breakaways, and you'd see a few fights, and it was a little of everything, it seemed. So
I'd like to direct the conversation to the book now. I was just curious. The book had the same subtitle, How I Survived Life in the Crease and Beyond. However, in America, it's called A Matter of Inches, and in Canada, it was called The Crazy Game. What was the reasoning behind the different titles from one country to the next?
Well, when the book was being done and everything, the publisher, HarperCollins in Canada, the Canadian, they have a U.S. and a Canadian version. So they were the ones that actually published the book first. Then, it was picked up by a United States publisher, which was Triumph. And they didn't like the title, The Crazy Game. And I'm not really sure why. Whether it was the implications, because I talk, of my mental illness quite a bit. So maybe the implication was crossing the line. But if you read the book, it's not, because I really did feel like I was crazy. And so it jumped out to me, The Crazy Game. But, the Matter of Inches, it's not bad either, because it kind of, relates to the injury where I almost died. So that to me it's sometimes a little confusing for some people, but it's worked so far. Obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, depression, and later on in life, post-traumatic stress disorder after the injury. But how'd you like to play otherwise, Mrs. Lincoln? Frankly, it's amazing we're even having this conversation today. I mean, you shouldn't probably even be here. And these are things you admitted to in the book that you've cheated death on several occasions. How often do you think about that? And do you wake up in the morning and say, "I'm damn glad and lucky to be alive"? Yeah, I mean, really that in a lot of ways I have things that keep me going, keep me motivated because of the past and the problems that I've had. So yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways it's in a way it's almost part of my therapy, because if I get through a day without I'm in a pressure situation or everything, or I'm going into one, I said, well, I'm not going to drink over it because I have to I struggle with alcoholism. So those are kind of things that keep me going. Like you said, I'm lucky to be alive today. And it does cross my mind for sure. The book's overall message seems to be one of survival. Be it your home life as a kid with a violently alcoholic father, or only violent when he was drinking. Right. And then later on he was just altogether absent. Your journey to the NHL, maintaining your roster spot in the NHL, and most importantly, surviving your mental health issues that for most of your life you couldn't even identify. That's how far we've come too, as far as helping people. You've dealt with more adversity in a lifetime than many. Why write this book when you did? Like, why did you wait until, the book just dropped November 1st of 2014, but this is obviously something you had dealt with for quite some time. Why now? Yeah. Well, the book was kind of in the works years ago. People were saying you should write a book because you have so many funny stories, that sort of thing. And I think where it really came to, the forefront was when after the suicide attempt in 2008, I went through a period of just craziness. And, surviving that, I was like, why was I spared again? For me, that was, to help people, to get the word out, to, and once I got better, through therapy and treatment center, it really became a push for me to get it done. To do the book, I didn't enjoy doing the book. People ask me a lot of times, was it therapeutic? And no, because I'd done the therapy, and it really was difficult. I kind of stepped back and say, I don't know if I can do this. I don't want to do this now, but I always finished, and came back to it and finished the book. So for me, I guess the real gratification, or the real, was after the book was finished, the feedback that I got, mostly from fellow sufferers, a lot of military, first responders with PTSD, just people that have suffered with depression or OCD. It's been very helpful to them. It's obviously it's not a self-help book by any means, but it's turned out to be because I'm not a doctor or anything. It's just my life, and now that I'm doing well, I think it gives people hope and inspiration that they can get well too.
Well, you mentioned, you're not a doctor and this isn't a self-help book. However, I think what people can take away from this is the fact that you don't necessarily always just have to use the means of going to somebody with a plaque on their wall that says that, they're a doctor, or, they have a degree from someplace. Anybody who reads this, I would say, says, hey, with everything that this guy went through, and he's come out on the other side and has been has survived and has beaten this thing and continues to fight it every day. I can do the same thing.
And I do go into depth on the paths that I took, getting well too. So it does encourage people to reach out and talk about it, and to get the proper medical help, or use your friends and family to help you as well.
So this wasn't cathartic at all. By your description, it sounds as if this was a painful process to actually get this book written and done.
Oh God, yes. It just wasn't fun, not at all. I didn't look forward to sitting down or picking up the phone with my co-author Dan Robson. It was. It wasn't. Oh, good. We get to talk about this today.
Yeah.
Because I give a lot of credit to Dan, because I think had I done it alone, I would have just said, I went through this and this happened and this happened. With Dan, he said, well, what were you thinking at that time, and what were you feeling at that time? So that really helped me and pushed me, as reluctantly as I was to do it, to go that deep. I had to go into those experiences again and bring up all that emotion, and that's what made it so hard. But that's what's made the book so helpful to people, as I went that deep, and that's why. Because if I only go halfway, it's only going to help people that are a certain amount, to a certain degree, that are suffering. So as deep as I went, I think that's helped a lot more people that way.
As a kid, you knew that something about how you felt on a daily basis wasn't normal, and at times it frustrated you, not to mention your mother. In part, it caused you a lot of turmoil in school, and even in some social circles. In Chapter 4 of the book, you chronicle your third-grade experience, and in particular, your interaction with a teacher by the name of Ms. Wobblebottom. If you would, please go into, for the listeners, your school career, as it were, and maybe some of the incidents surrounding the pelting of Mrs. Wobblebottom with a chalk eraser.
Oh boy, I think I was just suspended. But my mom went to the school and got me back in, because she felt it was provoked a little bit. But I was not a good student. I think you hear a lot of that with kids, that and they might be labeled later on or diagnosed with ADD, and I probably had that as a kid. I really struggled. I didn't get things real quick, and I felt that I look back now, and I think a lot of the school system failed me too, because they didn't they'd see that my homework was wrong and that I struggled here and there, but they didn't really address it or pull me aside. But this one teacher, she was very militant and strict, and she'd use her yardstick and smash it over to your desk. And one time, I was sitting at the back of the class, and she threw a chalkboard eraser and just missed me, and it hit the wall behind me, and I thought that was uncalled for, so I picked it up and threw it back at her and hit her right in the chest, and the chalk went poof up in her face. And
man, I'm sorry.
She chased me out of the class where I ran, and I went outside and climbed up the monkey bars because I was terrified of this teacher. And she was about 5 feet tall and about 5 feet wide, and built like a fire plug, and she was very intimidating. So I wasn't coming down from those monkey bars.
Hence the name Mrs. Wobblebottom.
Yeah. Well, her real name was Wobomb, and but it always came out Mrs. Wobblebottom. Maybe her stature too had something to do.
So at about 11, 12 years old, you said in the book that your mind started spinning laps around your brain. There was an incident with a knife that led to your incarceration. In the book, you referred to it as abstract at the time. However, in retrospect, it really was a precursor to the next 35 years or so of your life. What led you to your hospital stay?
Oh, boy. I was very, very anxious at that time. Just severe anxiety all the time, and uncontrollably crying, and I was hospitalized after I told them that I was suicidal, and they thought at that time they really didn't know what to do with me except sedate me when I'd have my episodes, and I was in the hospital for about 2 months, and I finally got out of the hospital. I'm not sure that I was any better. I'd see a child psychologist, and I think the home life had a lot to do with the anxiety. And you touched on it earlier. I didn't feel normal as a kid. I saw other kids and how they interacted and played and seemed happy. So it was a trying time, and at the time I just don't think we were very far in child psychiatry or psychology at all.
Yeah.
Especially with children, because let's face it, I don't think there was a lot of kids that came out with their there wasn't a lot of research in the child side of things, I don't think, at that time.
Yeah, I guess it was in the point in time in history. It was a case of, let's get him admitted, let's get him sedated, medicated, what have you, and they really attacked the core problem or problems. Now, this was right around the time that your parents had split, correct?
Well, they had kind of split a few times and gotten back together. I think it was later on that they actually split. There was several separations, or looking back now, I'm not even sure there's separations. I think Dad just would take off for a while on a drinking binge.
More specifically, I'm referring to the point in the book where you detailed a particular incident where your father had come home after a drinking binge and started breaking windows from the outside of the house, and the cops had to be called. Was that kind of the pivot point where the anxiety became a more dominant force in your life?
Yes, I remember that. I think that was the beginning of the real uncontrollable crying, terribly anxious, didn't want to go to school, didn't want to leave the house. Yeah, for sure. That episode, I think, really set things off.
Another story from the book is, and if I can get self-indulgent here for a second, is you were playing ball hockey with your good friend Kelly Rudy. Side note, former goaltender for the New York Islanders, and things had gotten heated, and you punched him square in the face. And he said you didn't really remember it, but then again, you punched a lot of guys in the face. How much of that was, just boys being boys and the culture of hockey and what have you, and how much of that had to do with the mental health issues that you were going through.
Well, I think I was definitely brought up with the mentality that, you're a hockey player, you don't take at a very young age, you fighting was a big part of the game, and if you're going to play the game, you got to be half tough and this and that. But I think a lot of it too was the fact that I was in a violent home life with my father, and that you act like your parents, and it's probably both of those things together.
Now, you did have escapes where you could go and get away from your feelings of anxiety and depression. There was a hockey rink or skating rink within walking distance to your house. These are places where you could actually go and rid yourself of these horrible feelings. You elaborate a little more as to how you were able to escape, and the differences between, when you were, say, at the rink and when you were either on your way home from the rink or not there at all, or what have you.
Oh, yeah, and I didn't realize it until later, how we go through life and you kind of look at things in retrospect. And, I was so free on the outdoor rink and just playing and having fun and just, that's, I think, when I was actually acting my age as a kid. And then when I'd walk back home, I remember now that's when the anxiety would start to sink in, kind of start elevating and come back, first of all, and then elevate as I got closer and closer to home. And now, of course, you look back and go, well, yeah, I get it. You're going back to your kind of a crazy place,
And you spent a lot of time at that rink now, right?
Oh, absolutely. I stayed there. I was there more than any kid, longer than any kid. They would basically have to turn the lights out and send me home. Say, okay, you got to go home. So that's. I think that I did have a dear love for the game, obviously, and I spent so much time at the rink and everything. And I think now that you look at it, well, part of it was that's where you're at peace too. Uh-huh. And when you're a kid, you don't really think that deep into things. Now I look back and go, part of the reason I stayed at the rink so much, yes, love of hockey but probably just the freedom from and the escape from the anxiety.
Well, there you have the first part of my interview with former NHL goalie Clint Malarchuk. I'm going to take a break, and when I return, life gets real. How OCD became both a blessing and a curse, life as an NHL goaltender, and an on-ice accident that almost killed Malarchuk in front of an arena full of hockey fans, and how it turned existing nightmarish mental health issues into an almost fatal downward spiral. And later, how Clint cheated death one last time, turned it into his life's purpose, and now uses it to help others with the same mental health issues. And what was the off-the-wall question that he posed to President Ronald Reagan? All this and more on Calling Audibles Radio and PurposeToPlay.com. Be right back.
Malarchuk and Gamble are tied up, and they're going to go at it. Gamble and Malarchuk have dropped the mitts. And they are wailing away at each other. This has turned ugly here in Las Vegas, and right now Gamble is getting fed by Malarchuk.
And he missed with that low shot. Telios from this angle. He had a shot blocked at the siren. And a fight started to the left of Bouchard.
Look at this. They got both clubs coming on the ice. Look out.
This is bad.
Look out.
At the siren, everybody is on the ice.
Look out. Nyland is after somebody in back of the pack, and away they go. Spare goaltenders. Everybody's on there now, and the melee starts. Sevigny right in the middle of it with Malarchuk, and there is a pileup down there that is dangerous because somebody could get hurt.
Now you notice the referee Bruce Hood, he will not get
Look out, look at this. Sevigny and Malarchuk are going at it.
The
two spare goalies down in the corner. Montreal bench.
Number 30, Clint Malarchuk. 5 minutes for fighting.
Base, 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 base. Louisville Soul Train. Louisville Soul Train.
Thanks to HockeyFights.com and YouTube for providing the audio. Welcome back to Calling Audibles Radio on PurposeToPlay.com. I'm your host, Matty Petrero. A few months ago, I was honored to speak with former NHL goaltender, mental health disease survivor, public speaker, and cowboy, Clint Malarchuk. He spoke openly and honestly about his battle with mental health disease, life in the NHL, surviving near-death experiences, including a horrific on-ice injury and suicide attempt, and parlaying all of these experiences into a way to reach others who have suffered with mental health disease themselves. His book, A Matter of Inches, My Life in the Crease and Beyond, was released last fall and is not only a great read, I highly recommend it, but it has also helped many of those who have read it through their own battles with this silent disease. Now back to my candid interview with Clint Malarchuk on Calling Audibles Radio. Now, Clint, you're a tireless worker. You and I even had a hard time connecting because of it. You're always on the go. You're at speaking engagements, etc. This goes back to your days as a youngster trying to work your way into juniors and also into the NHL. A lot of it is hard work, but you had, in a matter of speaking, you had a kind of an ace in the hole, which is kind of a blessing and a curse. Why don't you explain what it is that made you such a somebody that works so hard?
Well, I think that's where the OCD starts to come into play a little bit. You know, I think, you know, obsessive compulsive disorder. For me, at least I was able to focus it not so much on the. Yes, there was rituals and acting out, but more of it was, you know, I focused it towards a positive thing with being the best I could be at hockey. And it started at a very young age. And so, you know, I had that obsessive work ethic that I was gonna do everything in my power to make my dream come true. And, you know, I talk in the book how that probably helped me get to the NHL and probably stay in the NHL as long as I did, because I wasn't the most talented. And I think, you know, the fact my brother was a goalie as well and he had more skill, you know, I was able to, you know, surpass his goals. And you know, he even admits himself that I just plain out worked harder. And, you know, I guess the good story in there is that it does give people with lesser skills hope that they can achieve their dreams like I did. That part of it also is that, you know, you pick, if you're willing to do the extra work, I guess. Like for me as a student, I wasn't very good, so I was probably not going to choose a scholastic career in it, you know, where I had to go to school and education because it was so hard for me. Now, that being said, if I was willing to put in the extra work that the, let's say, normal person would have to, they get it easier. They don't have to work as hard, you know. But my focus was the other way. It was on hockey.
So on top of you being driven anyway, I guess your this is in one case where your mental health disease actually benefited you, at least initially. I know there were several stories in the book about how when most people would be absolutely spent. For example, I know there was one story where you went out with a bunch of your teammates. It was either after practice or after a game, and you basically stayed out all night and closed the bar down. you went home and you went to bed. You got about an hour or two of sleep because your mind was racing so much that you ended up waking up, and instead of trying to find a way to work yourself back to sleep, you just you went to the gym and worked out.
Yeah, and that's probably the OCD again, more than of course that I did have my goals, but with OCD you can kind of go beyond the norm as far as just unreasonable, people think you're crazy of what you're doing and the extremes you're going to working out and training. And, like I said, I think I credit OCD for a lot of my success. It was later on when it overtook my life.
So once you got going in your hockey career, life starts getting real. You have to maintain your level of play, and you have a family, wife. You end up having kids. How did that exacerbate your condition at all? And how was it to try to manage? Kind of getting to the point where it's no longer you're dealing with it as a kid. Now you're kind of you need to be kind of a grown up at this point. How did it affect your your OCD and your anxiety, etc.?
Well, I think it was peak and valley with on a graph scale. It would be kind of up and down where. Stress with mental illness, anxiety attacks, depression, all those things does exacerbate your symptoms. And for me, different parts of my career, it was there, and it was up and down. It's hard to explain how it would come on really hard and be there, but then it would decline at times. And looking back, I can also say during the off season, when the pressure and the stress of hockey and to perform wasn't there on the daily basis, it was more manageable. And I think it just every year would probably crank up a few more degrees, and then of course the accident, and after that, with being diagnosed with PTSD, that's where I look and go, wow, I really did go off the charts.
Well, thank you very much for the segue. I'm going to fast forward. You've gone through a successful stint in Quebec, another pretty successful stint in Washington, and now you're on to your final stop in the NHL, which was the Buffalo Sabres. It's also the place where your life would profoundly change forever. It's March 22nd, 1989, the Odd in Buffalo. It's the Buffalo Sabres against the St. Louis Blues. A little more than 5 minutes remaining in the first period. And there's a dump in into your zone. And St. Louis Blues forward Steve Tuttle is coming hard at the net, crashing the net as a forward is supposed to do in a lot of centering situations. On him, marking him, is a very large defenseman, Huey Krupp. The puck is centered, and there's a pile up in front of the net. Take us through what happened from that point.
Well, it obviously, I was down on my knees trying to make a save, and, the skate just came directly up, and I kind of flinched, opening, I think, more exposing my neck, because, when something's coming to your head, you move your head, and right. The skate, I think, bounced off my mask a little bit, and, but it did cut my jugular vein, and, from there, it was kind of a nightmare, or the beginning of one, because I really believed, with that amount of blood and the way it was squirting, that I knew it was a main artery, and it was very life-threatening. I knew all those things flashed in my head, and I I really didn't think I was going to live. And my first instinct was, well, I better get off the ice because, I knew my mom was watching the game on TV back in Canada, and I really just thought that, get off the ice so she doesn't see this.
Yeah.
And from there, obviously I had medical attention, and that's what saved my life was the immediate medical attention. I don't think if it was it was a major sporting event, so that had it been in just a recreation game, I probably wouldn't have made it.
Enter Buffalo Sabres trainer Jim Pizzatelli, who was maybe most instrumental in saving your life that night, and a lot of it could be owed to his service as a medic in Vietnam, correct?
These guys are all trained, what to do, but the fact that Jim was in Vietnam and had seen some things, I think kept his calm. He wasn't his first dance, and he was able to, keep his calm even in front of, 16,000 people and TV audience on top of that.
And like you said, trainers in the NHL are equipped to handle, the knee injuries, the injuries to your limbs, concussion evaluations, things like that. But especially, you're talking 26 years ago now that this took place. I can't imagine that without his Vietnam training, that anybody would have really known what to do in this case.
Well, on hands training, probably not a lot, as far as. But they're told what to do in situations as far as medical trainers. But again, I just think being around that probably in Vietnam for him wasn't the first time, and that added pressure of people just right there watching you save somebody. Maybe that didn't even cross his mind. Maybe just the fact that he had to save somebody's life. Was all that he was focused on. But, the amount of blood that came out so quickly and people passing out and, so graphic, he was able to keep cool.
Now, I vaguely remember this when it actually happened originally. They broke through the game. I was watching with a buddy and went to footage of it, and I remember it just being horrific. I would not recommend anybody going in looking. It's out there on YouTube if you want to, do it at your own risk. But if you have a weak stomach, I would not recommend it. And what I recall reading when I was doing some of the research for this interview is accounts of fans passing out in the stands. 3 players allegedly vomited right on the ice, and there were actually 2 heart attacks in the stands, based just all because of how absolutely gruesome this injury was.
Yeah, that's all. Obviously, I wasn't aware of that at the time. I was worried about myself, but that was all reported. Yeah.
So, how many stitches did that take?
They said they stopped counting at 300. So.
Holy cow!
Yeah, there's stitches. With an injury like that, they have to stitch the inside, any tissue and muscle that's been severed. So they, that's counting the inside as well.
So after almost losing your life on the ice with such an injury that took over 300 stitches, you still managed to make it back on the ice in 10 days. Is that right?
Yeah, I had to wait till the stitches came out, and that's when I was able to play. And I remember it hurting a little bit, and I was afraid it would rip open again, and, you have these awful thoughts. And,
Sure.
but other than the lack of, the loss of blood that made me kind of weak, it was all psychological trying to get through it.
Right.
It was more the just the trauma that happened, and you got to fight through it and come back and play. I felt that the sooner I came back, the the easier it would be. And if I had to do it again, I probably would have done it as quick. But counseling probably would have helped, and just making sure that things were addressed that doesn't affect you as deeply.
So in the book, you stated that the PTSD that you would eventually suffer from as a result of this injury didn't really kick in until about 3 weeks after the injury. Can you elaborate on that?
I think I rode that adrenaline of coming back like I did. I was kind of a hero for doing that. I was getting lots of credit for doing that. So I just think the adrenaline and the city, the way it backed me, Buffalo was like, that's a blue-collar town. They really embrace their blue-collar type players, which I was. I think that that adrenaline kept me going and kind of masked any PTSD that may have been there. It just I rode that wave.
And of course, as an athlete, you understand as well as anybody that you can only ride adrenaline and emotion for so long.
Right.
So then, after the PTSD kicked in, if your mind wasn't already a giant whirling dervish, this really just kind of pushed it over the edge. It affected your sleep.
Right.
Anytime you could actually get a little bit of sleep, it was only for a short time before the nightmares would wake you up.
The nightmares were intense.
Go through kind of like what the patterns of a normal night for you were after the PTSD really started to take effect.
Well, when it really started to hit me, after the accident, it would just be going to bed was almost, anxiety, because I was like, okay, I know I'm going to fall asleep or drift off, and that image is going to be there, and it's going to be vivid, it's going to be real. And so it was almost like I need to sleep, I want to sleep, we got a game tomorrow, but subconsciously it's like, don't go there. It's like going back to the real thing that happened. And like I said, it wasn't just a little, it was very vivid, it was very intense, and the emotion and the fear, all those things would you just wake up sitting straight up in bed, panting and holding your neck, going, did that just happen again? It was reliving it to the degree. And at the time, I didn't tell anybody, I didn't say anything, I just thought, it's a nightmare. The word the PTSD hadn't even been, those words or letters weren't even in our vocabulary then, I don't think. And so, I didn't think anything of it. I just thought I'd get through this. Yeah. So for me, the lack of sleep, I think, really enhanced all the other symptoms, like the depression and anxiety, and the OCD became, off the charts, where it was hard for me to leave the house, and anxiety, and then depression. It was a vicious cycle that would just happen through different stages through the day and in the evening, and then the sleep thing.
So I guess that really speaks to your point about seeking counseling, and how it was something that just didn't happen, 25, 26 years ago. And, if I had to guess, I would say that's probably one of your biggest messages when you are on one of your speaking engagements is, don't be a hero, don't be prideful, go seek the help that you need.
Well, yeah, but I didn't think of counseling. It wasn't brought up, and I never thought of it either. So I'm certainly not pointing the finger when I say that. It's just the way that the world we lived in back then. And plus that hockey mentality as well, I think, made it even more so.
So after a night of virtually no sleep, what would the following day be like for you? How much of the following day would actually just be like one long sleepwalk?
Well, it was just everything compounded. Every day it seemed worse. I mean, I think at one point I just remember that the hardest part of some of the days was the burning in my eyes because of the lack of sleep.
Yeah.
It was just almost like and in practice you're trying to follow the puck and your eyes are burning and tearing. That was there was almost excruciating that pain. That was just, and then there was the other side of just the cycle of the anxiety and depression and OCD just over and over throughout the day.
So things were really bad now at this point, and to make matters worse, you throw alcohol into the mix.
Well, yeah, I found, maybe if I had a few drinks, I'd sleep, it started to help me, for a period anyways, where if I drank, I could escape the anxiety. It would calm me down. It would, at the time, maybe take me out of my depression for a while, even though it is a depressant. For a lot of people, it's not at the time when you're drinking. And so for me, it was more of a form of medication and escape. And that's when you start to depend on it and rely on it, and then all of a sudden you got that problem going for you because it doesn't work forever.
Okay, let's fast forward a little bit. The 1991-92 season in Buffalo would be your last in the NHL. You then went to the IHL for a bit, and you finished out your career. Still having the passion for hockey, you go into coaching and consulting in both the NHL and the IHL. I believe even a stint as a head coach in San Diego. But as recently as 2013, as a goalie coach or consultant with your hometown Calgary Flames. So now once your playing days are done and you get into coaching, my initial thought would be there would be more time on your hands, and thus it would become more difficult to stave off these anxious feelings and the obsessive compulsive disorder. And now, was that the case? And if so, how did you cope with that? How did you get through having more time on your hands and having to spend more time looking, staring these issues dead in the face?
Well, I by then after San Diego, I got there and I got on some medication. So a great doctor who really helped me. And so by the time I got into the coaching, I was doing really, really well. And for a number of years, almost 12 years, I would say, 13 years. And then I started to spiral down again because the Buffalo Sabres in Buffalo playing the Florida Panthers, Florida guy Richard Zednik got cut in the neck. And then I started to flash back again, and the medication I was on, I think my body had been kind of getting immune to it. And so that's when the new chapter of my mental illness began to, rear its head, and I started to struggle and self-medicate again.
Now, Clint, if you would, please refresh my memory as to when Richard Zednik's accident took place.
That was 2008.
So from that point until your attempted suicide, there really wasn't a whole lot of space and time in between those. Now, as indicates in the book, you were out back. You own a nice parcel of land, so you have some open space. You're out back. You're shooting targets or rabbits or whatever. And then what happens?
Well, I was really in a bad way mentally and very depressed. The OCD was back to an extreme. I was acting out. I was violent, throwing things, and just really didn't know what was going on, and scared. And I was out with the gun shooting, and my wife had come home, and I was just out of my head with anger, and I just put the gun under my chin and pulled the trigger, and it was just that was probably the beginning. As tough as a time, yes, I survived it, and I wake up out of a coma, and 6 months in a treatment center, and there's a lot in the book I described on the anger issues I had, and a lot of military people have reached out to me that they can relate to that, and where does all this anger come from, and and that is where I was diagnosed with PTSD from the 1989 accident. So I'd gone 19 years or 20 years with all this PTSD just in me, just waiting, and thus, I look back. They asked me, what was it like after that accident in Buffalo, and I said, well, I thought about it, and that's when I really started to become over the top with the OCD, the depression, the anxiety that I described, that I couldn't leave the house and all those things. But through the therapy and everything that I did 6 months, things really started to turn around. I accepted the PTSD, which I fought at first because I had that. Are you kidding me? I came back. I wasn't affected by that injury. I came back. But again, they asked me to reflect on how I was after the injury, and that's when I accepted it and worked through it. And even today I'm still affected, but I have tools to work through it.
So, have you had any moments of desperation, anxiety, or any suicidal thoughts since you have developed these tools?
I would just say more that I have good days and bad days, way more good days, and no, I'm not suicidal. I'm not anything, but it's like a daily program for me, and I did. I have to keep on top of things. I have to do my daily program to keep ahead of the game, I guess, and that's why I probably haven't had any issues that are to any high degree. I'm feeling a little squirrely now. I just did a boot camp with the military disabled veterans that struggle with PTSD and things like that. So it was very intense. So I'm a little on the edge now, and I know I got to get my rest and get caught up and get centered. But I'm aware. The difference is I'm aware of where I'm at right this minute and where I'll be, getting grounded and doing the things I have to do to stay on top of things.
So now you are a public speaker, and you go and you talk to people about recognizing mental health disease and how to take care of it and how quickly to take care of it. Yeah.
That's kind of what I do now. I love the military, and so working with them this past week was awesome. With these guys, they're just such great guys, and they can relate to my story, and I certainly try to help them. And I think for me the biggest part for me now since the book came out was the positive feedback that it's helping people and getting asked to speak, and that helps people and meet people and trying to get more involved in helping the military vets that come back, and that there's 22 suicides a day from veterans, and that's incredible. So if I can help anybody or save one life, it helps me to be helpful. Being of service is what keeps me going, because it's a therapy for them. It's a therapy for me. It's a support system.
But I would also gather that it gives you a real sense of purpose.
I mean,
yes. For sure.
Well, it makes sense then that this seems to be your calling in life, because it said that God doesn't give anything to anybody he doesn't feel can handle it.
Well, then I wish he'd quit trusting me so much.
But clearly your purpose is here now to use your experiences to save other lives.
Right, exactly.
So another one of the things that I drew from this book is your support system. There are several people you mentioned in the book, almost reoccurring roles, if you will, who are your biggest, I guess, your biggest supporters, the people who have been there for you through thick and thin. I want to do a little rapid fire, and I'm going to give you a name, and I want you to just say the first thing that comes to mind. Your mom.
Oh, fighter.
Your brother Garth.
Father figure.
Your former teammate and head coach, Rick Dudley.
He is a foxhole man and a real friend, like the real deal. Not, we all have friends, but he's the one that jumps in the foxhole with you.
One of your best friends from childhood and fellow NHL goalie, Kelly Rudy.
Childhood buddy and still a close friend.
Another one of your teammates, Dale Hunter.
Oh, True Grit.
Ah, nice John Wayne reference. I like it. Jim Pizzatelli.
Oh, man. The doctor.
And last but certainly not least, your wife, Joni Malarchuk.
She's my saint. I dedicated the book to my mom and to my wife, Joni. It's funny, we do books, like, she's a big part in the book because she, you know, if you read the book, people are probably, they go, how did she do it? Why did she stay with him? He was a complete ass. He was crazy. He was acting out. And she, you got to remember, too, she's my fourth wife, so I'd probably gone through, you know, pushed a few people out of my life. Yeah. With mental illness, but she stayed in there and hung in there, and you know, people that read the book and we do a book signing or something, they want her to sign it because she plays such a big part in the book.
Well, clearly a very strong and committed woman. Now I want to end the interview with my absolute favorite part of the book, my favorite story in the book. Did you actually ask President Ronald Reagan if he took a run at Barbara Stanwyck?
I did. Because, you know, we had a great conversation, and it became very light and friendly. So basically, I think he enjoyed the fact that he wasn't being, you know, he was just conversing with a guy, and we had a lot in common with horses and cattle. He had a ranch in California, so right. It just kind of evolved into a good old boy conversation, and you know, that's the comment. But yeah, he was a very nice guy. They're very down to earth.
Well, as I said, that is my favorite part of the book. I am a huge admirer of President Reagan's.
Me too.
Clint Malarchuk, former NHL goalie, survivor, cowboy, an all-around good guy. I really appreciate you joining me here tonight on Calling Audibles Radio, and I appreciate your candor, your openness, and what you're doing now is a really awesome thing. And the best of luck to you, and thank you for all the time you've given me.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and it's well worth it. We reach out.
Well, thanks very much, Clint, and keep up the good fight.
Okay, thanks very much.
Great guy and stellar job by Clint Malarchuk. Going to take my final break, and when we get back, it is time for Jeers and Cheers and a rundown of what's in store for the next edition of our mission here on Calling Audibles Radio and PurposeToPlay.com. And now the final segment of the program, of course, that is Jeers and Cheers. And we're going to focus this episode's Jeers and Cheers on this past Independence Day weekend. We're going to start off with the jeers because I always like to end the show on a high note. Originally, I had a different nominee in mind for the Maddie Award for this episode's Jeers of the Week. However, in light of the events over the Independence Day weekend involving Jason Pierre-Paul of the New York Giants and blowing off the index finger on his right hand with fireworks, I couldn't help but reverse course and focus my consternation toward JPP. If I could borrow a line from Jay Leno when questioning Hugh Grant in 1995 about cheating on then-girlfriend, the stunningly beautiful Elizabeth Hurley, with a prostitute, what the hell were you thinking? You're a professional athlete, a defensive end in the NFL, whereby your hands are extremely important. To make matters worse, you're only 3 weeks out from the start of training camp and 8 weeks from the start of the 2015 NFL season. Unless you forgot, or had a case of severe brain flatulence, being a pro football player is your job. There are aspects to this incident that are akin to players who go out to clubs, get wasted from partying, and then get behind the wheel of a car. First of all, as a professional athlete in the biggest sport in the USA, you get paid very well. And while you could easily pay a professional to accomplish the objective at hand, no pun intended, such as calling a cab when you've been drinking, you decided that you had this. However, by allowing your ego to usurp common sense, not to mention the consideration for those in your life who rely on you, like your family and your teammates, you have endangered the well-being of both. You see, JPP, who made $1.18 million in 2014, was in line to get a new contract or at least get the franchise tag, which means, at a minimum, he would have been paid the average of all defensive ends in the league. To put it in plain speak, that's a franchise tender that would have paid him in the area of $14 million for the 2015 season. That is now put on hold while he rehabs the area where his index finger used to be, as well as a broken thumb on the same hand. JPP has a family who relies on his paycheck. Now, I'm not sure how he lives in relation to his means, but even if he lives under his means are still pretty high with that salary. Thus, his family is going to feel the squeeze of JPP's lack of income. Hopefully, he'll be back on the field sooner than later. As for on the field, Pierre-Paul has 52 teammates and a slew of coaches who rely on his contributions to achieve enough success to keep their jobs. This is their livelihood, and each part of a football team is like a precision piece of a Rolex watch. No other sport requires the symmetry that football does, and as one of the best pass rushers in the game, he potentially leaves an average Giants defense, at best, with even less resources. And even if he is back out there, he's missing an important part of his right hand, which is critical to his craft. Mike Lupica of the New York Daily News referred to it as a youthful mistake. Since when is a 26-year-old man referred to as a youth? Additionally, why is it that Lupica, and I'm sure many others as well, seek to make excuses for a 26-year-old man, not really holding him accountable for his actions? Let's cut out the enabling and start expecting adults to act like adults. Now look, the number one concern, of course, is the health and well-being of Jason Pierre-Paul. And I, for one, sincerely wish him the best for a speedy recovery. There's a big part of me which sympathizes with him, but there's a bigger part of me that says, use some common freaking sense. Get well soon, JPP, and make Giants Nation forget about this unfortunate incident. Now it's time for the cheers. If we're talking Independence Day weekend, who else should get the Maddie Cheers Award for this episode of Calling Audibles Radio? The U.S. women's national soccer team, of course, for bringing home the 2015 World Cup gold. For one glorious month this summer, these world-class ladies united all of us as they laid waste to two of the best sides in the world. Germany, 2-0 in the semifinals, and they annihilated Japan in a grudge match the U.S. team has been anticipating since 2011. I mean, in these United States, dogs and cats were rolling around on the carpet together, Red Sox and Yankees fans were speaking to each other pleasantly and without expletives, skiers and snowboarders coexisted, and I think I heard a rumor that Taylor Swift and Katy Perry actually kissed and made up. Now, don't hold me to that one. I'm still having that one checked out. Looking for sources if anybody can help me out with that one. In all seriousness, The U.S. captain, Carly Lloyd, led by example as she wasted no time putting us on the board with a beautifully designed set piece on a corner kick in the 3rd minute. She then tallied another set piece goal in the 5th minute and completed the hat trick just 16 minutes into the match with a cheeky lob from just inside midfield and over the Japanese keeper who was playing way off her line. Lloyd saw the opportunity and didn't miss. Between Lloyd's 2nd and 3rd goals, Lauren Holiday found the back of the old onion bag, and with only 16 minutes elapsed in the first half, the game was effectively over. Japan managed 2 goals, but one of them was an own goal in the 52nd minute. It was absolute dominance and a great team win. Throughout the whole tournament, different players came up with clutch performances at the right time. The defense locked down its side of the pitch as it only allowed a paltry 3 goals in 7 games. The offense wasn't chopped liver either. They found the back of the net 14 times. If you're following along at home, that's 14 goals to 3 in favor of Uncle Sam's ladies. No matter how you slice it, you're going to win an awful lot with those numbers. It had been 4 long years since the 2011 World Cup where the United States women lost a heartbreaker in a shootout to this same Japanese side. It was a game that the Americans controlled and held the lead until a late Japanese goal drew them even. There was no doubt that the U.S. women were the class of the tournament in 2011. Unfortunately, the best team doesn't always win. So this was a tough pill to swallow and one that didn't digest entirely until this past July 5th. The monkey is forever off the backs of several players who were part of that 2011 team. Speaking of some of those players who were part of that 2011 side, a special shout goes out to 2 of them competing in their last World Cup. I'm speaking about Christy Rampone and one of the most decorated American athletes ever, Abby Wambach. Both of them, but especially Wambach, could have made an argument to play more of a role in the finals and in the tournament as a whole. However, they proved that they were about the team and accepted their roles and contributed any way they could. In fact, Wambach tallied the only goal in the Americans' 1-0 victory over Nigeria and another against Colombia in group play. With the game well in hand late, it was time to pay proper respect to both Rampone and Wambach. Abby was subbed in for Tobin Heath in the 79th minute, and in one of the classiest moves one could see, Captain Carly Lloyd went over to Wambach and gave her the captain's armband to finish out her career as the captain, which is where she spent most of her career. In the 86th minute, Christy Rampone replaced fan favorite Alex Morgan so she could get on the field when the final whistle blew. Both of those veterans have carried the burden of the 16-year World Cup drought more than any other players during that period, so it only made sense that they go out on top. These world-class athletes individually left it all out on the field and committed themselves to one collective goal. You can't always say this about championship teams, but these ladies genuinely seem to care about and respect each other, and were going to do whatever it took to bring home the gold, make America proud, and forever ingrain themselves as the champions they are in American sports lore. Well done, ladies, and thank you for representing all of us on the world's biggest stage. This Maddie is for you. Speaking of women's soccer, I will welcome that 5 feet of firecracker, Brittany Alvarado, on the next episode of Calling Audibles Radio. We're going to discuss her trip to Western Canada for the finals of the World Cup, the victory parade down the Canyon of Heroes, and what's going on in the world of Sky Blue FC, which is, of course, New Jersey's professional women's soccer team. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Calling Audibles Radio. I want to thank Clint Malarchuk for joining me and being so generous with his time and his transparency about the difficult yet important discussion of mental illness. I also want to thank you for listening to this edition of our mission here at Calling Audibles Radio and PurposeToPlay.com. I'm Matty Petrero, and remember, don't sweat the petty things, don't pet the sweaty things, and treat each other well out there. And until next time, God bless. Stevie Ray Vaughan, take this thing home.
'Cause